Hello and welcome to my look at the dark side of cruising, where I take a bit of a different approach and make it more of a discussion. I love cruising and all of the benefits that it brings to me and my wife, as we get to explore the world, and from being able to see many countries on one holiday, to being able to visit some of the most remote places on earth. Cruising has brought all of that and so much more to me. You also get to travel with people from all over the world, and you gain an albeit small insight into cultures you have little knowledge of. Me and my wife are not ones for sitting on the beach for days on end or staying in a big holiday resort, but if we are to do a land holiday, we much prefer to head to a big city, where we can explore by using local metro systems, or head to an out-of-the-way place full of wildlife and natural beauty. When we're on a cruise, we don't need to choose between the two, as you can do both on the same itinerary, and get plenty more included alongside that. No matter what type of holiday that I choose to do, from staycations to short-haul city breaks, and from long-haul adventures to cruises, I understand that there are some issues that go along with it, but the same can be said about every time you leave your house. So that's not to play down any of the issues that come up in this discussion, as I am well aware that there is an ongoing issue for the cruise industry, and there are many things that the industry as a whole need to improve on. In this discussion, I take you through some of the biggest issues that I have with cruising, discuss what my problems are with it, and also what is being done or not being done to improve that issue. So if that sounds of interest to you, why not leave a like and subscribe, and comment below with any of the darker sides of cruising you have an issue with. So my name is Darren, and this is my discussion about the darker side of cruising. If, like me, you love to plan your days ashore to make the most of the time you have in each port, you will likely have tried to pack in as much as possible to each day. Anybody who has travelled before will know that things happen and plans often need to be changed. But while some things are out of the control of everyone, such as weather and medical emergencies, some things are well in control of the ships and the lines that you sail with, but they will always choose what's best for them. Sadly, that is something that happens far too often, and whilst it mostly just impacts your plans, onboard change can quickly ruin a whole day's adventure. We have had first-hand experience of this on more than one occasion, with the worst case coming on a visit to the Indian port of Kochi. We were scheduled for an overnight stay, and we would arrive at midday on the first day and then leave late afternoon on the second day. We booked a ship excursion on the first day to allow us plenty of time on the second day to explore on our own, but upon arriving in our cabin on the first day, a note had been left to tell us that the shore excursion had been switched to the second day in the city, ruining all the plans we had and totally changing our experience of the port. This isn't just a problem for the cruising industry, but it is something that is an issue for many cruise tourist destinations, and something that isn't an easy issue to solve. For the purpose of this conversation, I will just focus on the biggest issues surrounding this for the cruise industry, and to be honest, it is mostly of its own making. As cruise ships get bigger and bigger, and as they pack on more and more people, ports of calls just cannot cope with that influx. When you then get more than one behemoth of the sea in a relatively small port, you have problems for cruisers and problems for locals. Those visiting on the ship cannot get to see the real destination and experience what they want to do, as everywhere is crowded with fellow travellers and every attraction has a massive queue. For those living locally, they just cannot get on with their everyday life, as the pedestrian areas are packed, roads are blocked up with coaches, and shops are crowded. The answer is relatively simple, but incredibly expensive, so it won't get sorted. But if the industry can develop more ports, organise schedules so fewer ships are in smaller ports at the same time, and try to use fewer coaches, it will have a big impact in a short time. I am sure most of you will be well aware that cruise ships are registered to countries that they will likely never even visit, and that is something known as using a flag of convenience. There are many issues with this and many reasons for cruise lines to use them, but whilst many are problematic, but don't impact the cruise experience directly, such as lower tax rates and less judicial complexities, some are things that should be on cruisers' minds. Depending on the country the ship is registered in, there could be less stringent safety tests and inspections, less safety regulatory enforcement, more lenient environmental laws, and more exploitation risk towards staff. We have noticed quite a shift over the past decade or so from ships using countries with poor human rights records to at least using countries such as Malta with much better working condition expectations. A lot of the issues with these are being challenged by the cruise ports that the ship visit, so they are having to improve as an industry, but there is still a long way to go. This is one of those things that nobody really wants to think about, but it does happen, and probably a lot more often than you think. If you are near to land, the ship will head to the nearest port, but if you are to sea, the deceased may travel with you until you get to your next port of call, or back to your home port. With the lifetime of debt you will leave your family if this happens to you, make sure you have decent travel insurance. This is something that the industry never really wants to discuss, and in many ways you can't blame them. Cruise ships are floating cities, and sadly part of that is crime, but whilst cruise ships are relatively safe for the amount of people that sail on them, problems do occur, and from time to time people go missing.
I'm in danger!
When you have a few thousand people all relaxing, enjoying themselves, and with many having unlimited drink packages, you are going to get some of the problems that come with that, and just like in any town centre, people can leave a bar or restaurant and never be seen again. The thing I can never quite get my head around is that on a cruise ship, there is always somebody watching with CCTV everywhere, and you of course always have to scan in and off the ship. So whenever somebody goes missing and cruise ships claim to be helping with inquiries, but they are not quite sure if the person was on board or not, it just never quite seems right. Right? I best take my tinfoil hat off now. A lot of this one is down to me and my wife being big planners for holidays, and my wife being somebody who's very detail orientated and likes to know what is happening and when. With that in mind, it is strange to us just how much some cruise lines like to hide from you and not tell you until it's far too late to be of use. A family member of mine has just booked their first cruise and had plenty of questions for me, but it was with a line that I had never sailed with. I could give them some answers based on my past experience of cruising, but other things I would have to look up, and I just couldn't find the answers anywhere on the website of the line they were sailing with. Our personal worst case with this was a visit to a country that the majority on board would need a visa for. As ever, there were a few options, including a transit visa and a short stay visa. The short stay one allowed dual entry and was the one the immigration service of the country said that you needed. So we got that visa, and plenty of people we heard from who also sailed on the same cruise as us had gotten that one as well. The line had said that I couldn't give advice on this, so we went with what we understood we needed for a cost of around £50 each. About 3 weeks before sailing, the line emailed to say that we needed to have the other type of visa to board, which led to lots of anxiety, lots of worry, and lots of phone calls for many of those cruising on board. In the end, to make it worse, the line were wrong, and that lack of transparency and communication just caused more problems than needed, but they still managed to promote a visa service, which was very expensive to do when you could do it for yourself for free. This is something that everyone will experience when they book a cruise, as it is a constant almost across the board in the industry, and sadly it is the entry on this list with the least being done about it by the industry. We learned straight away when we took our first cruise that we needed to track the price of the cruise ourselves, and you just cannot believe anything you get from the line. One day you can check a cruise and at full price it is X amount. You then get an email to say there's a 30% off sale starting today. You check and the price is actually more than it was the day before when it was the full price. Yes, this is something that impacts every industry, and especially in a predominantly American based industry, but it does seem worse in the cruise one, as it seems to be in every aspect of the cruise holiday. One of the worst ones for us was a cruise line whose website booking process was broke, so we couldn't book online, but when we rang up to book, it cost far more than their own website was showing. Another big incident was when we rung a line to sort out some issues with excursions, and after around 20 to 25 minutes of being on the line and them just trying to get us to buy upgrades, I literally had to ask him to stop trying to sell me stuff and either allow us to book what I wanted to do or let me go elsewhere and try and book the excursion with somebody else. It doesn't matter if you book direct via an online travel agent or a real world travel agent. You will get bombarded with sales that aren't sales, upgrades that aren't really upgrades, and packages you don't want anymore that would only cost you more in the long run anyway. Seafaring has always been a tough life, and always will be, as you need to work long hours for long periods of time and be away from home. With lines expecting so much, it is disappointing to see how many use shell companies and flags of convenience to get around having to give the sort of protections, conditions and pay that would be expected by the vast majority of those cruising on the ship. There have been a lot of improvements to this, and the onboard conditions have gotten much better recently, but there are still massive discrepancies between the staff from developing nations, who mostly work behind the scenes, and those that are from more developed countries. This is something that really does change from line to line, and even from ship to ship. But with some of the ships we have sailed on recently having tired and overworked staff, it is something that is impacting cruisers' holidays, and that just cannot be ignored any longer by the lines. This is something that is much of a societal issue as it is for the cruise industry, but it just gets magnified on board a cruise ship, where people are living at close quarters for long periods of time. Aside from the people who are just not willing to learn, recent events have been a big wake-up call for most of us, and we have seen big improvements on most ships since we started sailing, and especially since 2019. One area we do like is the addition of hand washing stations in most buffets nowadays, instead of just hand wash. Our preferred lines have also made changes to their check-in process and to their muster drills, so that people don't have to spend time crowding in groups, which helps with a lot of the issues, and is now frustrating when you sail with a line who haven't adapted. Illness outbreaks are still an issue, with the norovirus still dreaded by cruisers. No matter what you do from day to day, there will be an impact on the environment, but of course some things are much worse than others. This is also something that some ports are clamping down on, and others are working with the industry to improve. So this is actually an area the industry as a whole is doing some good stuff with. From a personal point of view, we were always conscious of the emissions of the ship. You really just cannot miss it coming out of the funnels, but with less heavy fuels being used and technology improving things from a usage point of view, this is something that is getting better and better. Ship-to-shore power will really help the impact on ports from ships being in there in terms of the emissions, and floating piers will also help ships from having to drop anchors and damaging ecosystems. Wastewater, solid waste, single-use plastics and food waste are all major issues that you just cannot ignore. Thankfully, most lines are starting to wake up to the problems and are making changes, which just makes the holiday whole much better for everybody, and helps to keep the incredible port of call that we visit today better for the next generation. So there was my look at the dark side of cruising. As I say, I would love to get a discussion going, so please comment below with your thoughts. So all that remains to be said is thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.